In the patch notes for the 3.26 Secrets of the Atlas League, there was one change that I found particularly interesting, which was to the Grace of the Goddess unique wand, which now grants 10 to 50% instead of 10 to 30 of physical damage as extra lightning, cold and fire damage. With this buff and the Haunted by Tormented Spirits weapon enchant being gone, I immediately went to PoE build before the league started. So, few notes about the build. The initial version was made before we knew anything about mercenaries, and I personally don't really like them as damage neighbors. Call me a hater. So main merc setup doesn't really do much offensively. I was still able to do all the counter without the Oriani merc, such as Resonant tier 16.5 breaches with risks, Maven Witness Uber bosses and so on. That being said, I know and understand the power of Doriani's prototype and enemies being at -200% resistances. So I am including the version with Doriani and will go over the stuff that needs to be changed. Since the weapons we are using are stat sticks, we need something that gives us flat damage. Kinetic Blast of Clustering is such a thing. It is loaded with different mechanics. It deals added physical damage equal to the percentage of mana, making mana second an obvious shell. This fits well into a different property of the skill, which allows us to scale increased damage for Kinetic Blast attack damage at 200% value. And Indigon is a busted item if you can overcome its downside, and at its maximum effect, you get 4000% increased attack damage. Insane. The last part about the skill is that it only fires one projectile, and the extra projectiles the scale result into more explosions instead. This means we need a guaranteed way to hit an object or enemy to proc explosions, and for this we're using Tornado with Spellslinger, or it to spawn instantly with 0.6 second cooldown. And then the projectiles explode on top of it, then forks and can explode again. As for Ascendnacy, the usual go-to for this archetype is Hierophant, or its synergy with Mana second archetype. My problem with Hero are the fact that you don't really have a fourth Ascendancy point, as well as that the Scion area being far away from the good stuff you won't have on an attack build. Deadeye would be nice if we weren't playing a mana sacker with big payoff points being far on the left. And so Scion kind of fits naturally in what we want to get out of this build. Very strong Scion area for mana scaling and utilizing jewel combos, as well as having a Ranger Scion area at our disposal. As for the Ascendancy points themselves, I take Deadeye, as it is the best known on the tree, pick up Path of the Ranger to have an access to Ranger Scion area, and Assassin for crit related stuff. Hero doesn't provide enough value, and Slayer's Life over Leech is less impressive on a build that has so much energy shield. The passive tree is split into two parts. The Scion area is very good for mana scaling as well as utilizing the jewel combos. The placement is contentious. You can have Light of Meaning on the left and Unnatural Instinct on the right, or you can have Light of Meaning on the bottom and Unnatural Instinct on the left. The first option gives you movement speed, more life, accuracy and more mana. The second setup gives you more AoE for Kinetic Blast explosions and skill effect durations for things like Arcane Cloak. The Ranger area is all about picking up the efficient points along the way. And one cluster jewel. A quick look over the items. I've already mentioned the weapons I use and around 2 of them. On top of getting elemental damage, you're also getting extra Sacred Wisps, which trigger our KB when we attack. I talked about Indigon as well. It gives us mana and crazy amount of increased damage after we ramp. The body armor, boots and gloves are there to get mana, defenses, life and fix our stats. With a perfect tier of elemental avoidance on boots, the fixed skin cluster on the passive tree, as well as Ancestral Vision, we are getting our elemental ailment immunity. The cold conversion on gloves is there to balance out damage for Trinity. By itself it doesn't give much damage. This is why I'm not going for Winter Spirit and conversion here, because in total this whole cluster is giving us somewhere around 1.5% damage, which is not worth it. The amulet was the latest item I've upgraded. It's a reflected focus amulet with temple mana and crit multi. Since I wasn't going for triple positive, I have meta mod as it can get negative. Before this I ran this amulet, which is effectively a non-mirror focus amulet. It was cheaper at the time than attempting to transfer temple mana on the focus amulet with recombinators. Is it better now? You would have to check for yourself. Reflected mist prices are going up, and same goes for focus amulet base. The way you make an amulet is you roll tier 1 crit multi on non-influence focus amulet and annul the rest, and the only modifiers on the second base are temple mana, crit multi and 1 influence prefix. Influence modifiers are a part of non-native mod group, meaning that it contributes into a total pool of modifiers for recombination purposes, and if you hit the focus amulet in this example, you won't get influence modifier, leaving you with only temple mana on prefixes and crit multi on suffixes with it being the only modifier twice. The Del Ring has mana modifier, which you either transfer yourself or buy and fracture it. Then it's just a currnet and spam until you get all resistances and clean third suffix. Then you mana mod and reforge chaos until you get tier 1. And then you Exalt Slam for high tier mana or life. I like Mage Blood, so I run it. Topaz Flask gives us a lot of max res, and Bismuth Flask compensates for the meddling of the flesh we are running in this setup. Quicksilver and Silver Flask are there for speed. I've mentioned most of the jewels already, but here's a quick rundown. 3 rare jewels with max res, increased mana, and the rest is the combination of crit multi and attack speed. Unnatural Insect plus Light of Meaning combo in the middle. If you feel like you don't need mana, you can opt out for chaos res and free up suffixes on your gear. Melding is there to cap every resistance and not just one at 90%, and Ancestral Vision is there to cap our elemental avoidance. Double Clary Watcher's Eye for more survivability and mana sustain. On the classic jewel we are looking for 2 modifiers, one of them being Scintillating Idea for mana, and Stormdrinker to get Energy Shield Leech on our attack build, and Doriani Glorious Vanity, which gives us extra Energy Shield and splits the damage we take to enable Mind Over Matter. Now into the gems. The socket pressure is very low, so you can be creative about it. The 6th link is KB of Clustering, with Sacred Wisps and Trinity being our best damage supports. Arterial Projectiles got nerfed, but it's still very good for clearing purposes, and same goes with Awakened Fork. The difference with Fork and without it is immense. The last support is Inspiration, and it's there to make our mana cost more bearable when we ramp up with Indigon. And at that point you don't really have Inspiration charges, so it's there strictly to reduce the mana cost. I've tried to use Awaken Elemental damage with attacks, but there are moments where you KB because something like 2.5k mana, there are not enough enemies to leech off of, and then you skip your every other attack. And at that point it's just better to run Inspiration, but try it out for yourself. The rest of setup, as you can see, is me trying to make use of every socket that I got, which is why you'll see Enhance quite a few times, and Moderation. Here, Moderation, Smoke Mine, and Enhance. Smoke Mine is my trail skill of choice. It gives a significant movement speed boost for 1.5 seconds. And then Sigil Power is used against bosses or in places where you're more or less static. Tornado Spellslinger is there to guarantee explosions on our KB. And Lighten is a very minor thing to do, but as you can see we save up 200 mana. Another enhanced setup with Blood Rage and Sniper's Mark with Mark and Hit, to get more attack speed and more effectiveness out of Sniper's Mark. Another fall link is Arcane Clock, Automation, and Detonate Mines. We want to automate our Smoke Mine, otherwise it's very awkward. And Moderation plus Automation on Arcane Cloak, so it lasts for a while and again it's automated. The last gems go for Clary at level 1, for Watcher's Eye, Precision to get accuracy and crit, and Val Haze we can press every so often for movement speed and attack speed from time to time. Cartography Scarab of Risk plays a big role in high mapping, and because of this you really want to have a build that is resilient against as many of those modifiers as possible. While this wasn't my plan when I PvP'd this before the league start, it turned out to be pretty good for risk maps. The only mods I reroll are these: Volatile Cores, Reduced Recovery Rate, Cannot Regen, and Cannot Leech. Volatile Cores are just too annoying, and as for the rest, it's not like I cannot run them, I can, but it's about reducing the chance to encounter multiple of these. Reduced Recovery Rate is fine when you get it as a risk modifier, because it won't scale with the explicit effect on the Atlas, and Cannot Leech Regen are fine in isolation, but feel kinda weird when put together. I still have mana on kill and life on kill, but you know what I mean. To combat Reflect, I swapped my movement speed suffix flask for a Reflect one. If you roll into Mark for Death on top of Reflect, you also have to pick up Yugo's Small Pantheon, since the increased damage taken is added with reduced reflected damage taken. You cannot tank volatiles, so you'd have to just run away from them if you get it. The most toxic modifier is you cannot deal damage for 3 seconds every 10 seconds. You can reduce the debuff duration to 1.5 seconds with the Runegraft and Arakali Pantheon, though you have to have an internal clock in your head to make sure you are not on top of enemies when this happens, as well as that to not fire KB too often, because the lag of essentially hitting invulnerable mobs is crazy. As for the Merc, not much invested and was kinda an afterthought. I've just packaged nice defensive stuff like Grace with some aura effect, portion of physical damage dealt as fire, and Garb of ephemeral bonuses. And on top of that, 10% action speed from Froth and Agility. For anyone else who wants to get the max out of Merc and doesn't hate the mechanic like me, I've also prepped the Lightning setup. The Merc items are very standard: Doriani, Minosaurus Lightning Ring, that's reflected, Defiance to combat many small and mid hits, Downstrider to make sure it doesn't die to reflect, Front of the Tyrant and Ele Weakness Gloves to reduce the resistances for our other two elements, as well as getting some flat damage, and then Dawnbreaker for defenses. As for our character, I've dropped Forces of Nature and Revenge of the Hunter cluster for Arcane Blows and Heartseeker. The Lightning Pen doesn't do much, but the mastery is still very strong. I replaced Trinity with Awakened Wear, added Temporal Chains plus Balance of Terror against Petrification statues and other action speed related modifiers, replaced Conversion on Gloves for Lightning, because now it gives a lot of damage, but I keep at least 1% of physical damage non-converted, so then the Bleed Wheel still functions, and change the Anoint, since we are lacking the last 2% max res without the third rare jewel. And that's about it. Initially I haven't thought about making a video about the build, but after I re-rolled into it and played it, at this point for almost 2 weeks, I felt like it's a perfect endgame build for quite a few people, so I decided to share it. Funnily enough, because I'm a Doriani Merc hater, I was running the build without it the whole time and it was completely fine. So in a way, I guess I'm future-proofing it for 3.27. I hope that 3.27 will come out as promised somewhere in October, but that remains to be seen. And yeah, otherwise that's all I wanted to say. Thanks for watching, see you around.